So for today's 13 projects of Halloween, I'm basically I'm doing this plaque here, but really focusing on how I transformed this skull from Apothacary into a pirate. So I go into depth about coloring just, scrap fabric and how I colored him, and then how I built up this accessory, crossbones piece. Okay, so back in August, I had done this plaque with the skull and changed him into a pirate, and I got tons of love from the group I shared him in and just friends saying how cool he was. So this project I'm going to show you kind of how I did him, so if you wanted to try him yourself. And I would show you him physically, but I ended up giving him to a friend. So at the time in August, I didn't have the new release stamps, although you most definitely could use, if you got the new release, the Mr. Bones, you could use him. The only thing is you'd want to, probably downsize your scale. You'd probably do this more on just a tag versus like a plaque or like what I'll be using today with these frames. So because really is, you could just take and cover up this portion of the hat with the fabric. So most of the video will probably mainly be about altering him into a pirate. Maybe not so much the background papers that I use, but first off we're going to start. I've got black soot in this Archival ink. It's not jet black. I prefer the black soot, so that's the refill that I bought. And I am just inking that up, putting in a generous amount, and then stamping it. Now I'm going to end up leaving it in, and I'm going to leave it in here because for his teeth, because this is on the Distress mixed media cardstock, so his teeth I want to be white. So I'm leaving him in here, and I'm just using some Picket fence with a small, just little paintbrush. This is a fine tip. This is a, I don't know, the Simply Simmons number 2. It's just got a real small tip on it. Just so then that way I can try to stay a little bit controlled, because the rest of the area of the skull I'll be using inks. So I really don't want this acrylic paint to resist the ink. So I'm just filling in these teeth a little bit, not being real careful about going over the stamped image portion. That's why I left it in the stamping platform, so then I can go back over it when this is dry. So you can see that. Give it a quick little dry. There we go. Okay, so let's get the bandana going, because it's going to take a little bit of time to dry. Now, use any kind of fabric that you have as long as it's, porous. I mean, here's just some, plain cotton The original one, I had some of this laying around, so I used that, but then I also found some white linen that I used to back some curtains or something, so I'm going to use this. And the first step for me, I've got some, you know, recycled packaging. I think this was for post-it notes or something, but I'm just going to want to get this base color. I don't want it white, so I'm just wetting it down. It's just going to help that, you know, the ink, or this, I'm actually using stain first, just spread throughout that. So I've got some Distress Stain in Barn Door, and I'm just going to generously add this, and adding more water. I just want a good base to start with. Squeeze it. And then I definitely have some extra going on here. I think this piece is what we've got, about 5 by 2, 4, 6, 5 by 6, 5 by 7, which is going to be plenty to put, you know, on him, but that way it gives us some to come around the, you know, the side, and then just find the best color area on the piece. So I'm just going to take and put this aside, open it up a little so it doesn't take as long to dry. Now this is going to fade a little bit because this is wet, so of course it's a little darker right now, but that's what we want, because you know, we want the bandana to look worn. So that's going to be put aside, and then we are going to, I've got my skull cut out here, and while I was, you know, fussy cutting him, I also had a piece of black, just to add some dimension for him. And then I'm thinking, unlike the other one, we're gonna stamp some spider webs in there. But I want to get his gold tooth, so I've just got a Versamark here, and I'm just going to generously add some here. Now you could do all the teeth, it's entirely up to you. I've chosen just to do the one tooth, because pirates, you know, they usually have a gold tooth. That's what kind of makes them stand out, doesn't it? And I'm just using here, what is this? I don't know, I've had this forever. I don't usually use gold, but stamping stuff, it's just a fine gold powder. Clean that up. Melt it down, which you've seen this, you know what's happened. So I'm going to do this and then come back and we're going to color it. Okay, so for coloring, we are going to use pumice stone, old paper, because the oxidize adds like this really cool antique look, and then frayed burlap, because as I was comparing the browns, I swatched out like Tim suggests, which was the best thing I ever did. But anyway, frayed burlap adds this awesome kind of, you know, spooky gray, the oxidization does. So we're basically, you know, I've got just, I removed the silicone mat just because I want my inks, you know, just to pick up real nicely. And we're just going to use a water brush. You can see those there. Let me move down. You really can't see the frayed burlap. There we go. So I'm just going to use a water brush and just kind of concentrate in the shadowed areas that are already present in the stamped image. And excuse the background noise, my husband's out there doing some fall cleanup. Yeah, so I'm just, you know, starting my water brush here, and then just going to be picking up. I like to kind of go lightest into darkest because that's easier for me to control where it goes. And if I get too much, I can always just, you know, pick it up a little. This is a non-gessoed surface, so the paper's really gonna, you know, grab this ink. kind of like to get, I don't know, ink down first, just because then that way when I'm adding the oxide, because it's more opaque than regular inks, you know, the ink's already there for it to penetrate and move around a little bit. So nothing real fancy here, just kind of concentrating, like I said, in the shadowed areas. Let's get some oxide now going into these wet areas. And we're covering up this area with the fabric, so I'm not really too concerned with that. And just kind of randomly moving around, letting the water and the ink do its work. I'll add a little bit of the Frayed burlap in like the areas I really want it to kind of look dark and antiqued. There. So now I'm going to let this layer dry before I add any more. So let's check on our, this is still a little damp. I may end up trying to dry that a little. So I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, so let's move on. And I've got my spider web stamped here, and I ended up using Distress ink in Picket Fence. Because I wanted, you know, not a bold white like from a pigmented white, but I knew that the Distress would, yeah, kind of look like it's been there a while. And now with the Distress Picket Fence, when I first bought it, I really struggled with using it, but then I got the re-inker and I absolutely love it now. Anyway, so that gives that kind of a, see how it's not quite solid in some areas. I just, like I said, thought that it makes the spider web look a little bit more authentic. And then I've just got some foamy dots, and you know, of course I use the whole part of the foamy dots. That doesn't get thrown away. And I'm just going to lay, you know, this on here, nothing special, just so then I have the, you know, some dimension in there. And then we're going to start, my cloth is dry, and I'm just going to kind of fiddle, seeing about how much I actually end up I need. So I'm just going to, I only need to go to about here, and I like how there's some brighter red in here. So with this linen, it's really easy to rip. I don't want to cut it because I want that really rough edge. See there? And then I want it to kind of be on this side, and then we're going to wrap it around like this. Just kind of looks cool, I think. And I'm using regular gel matte, or you know, regular gel medium, because it's got, you know, it's got thickness that I'm looking for, because over here we're going to end up taking and squeezing, so I want that body of the gel to help me do that. So I like it there, so let's just going on this. So yep, I'm just putting a really generous amount because I need, when I'm pinching this, you know, for the gel to hold it in place. I'm just kind of folding it up as if, And then I'm kind of pinching it. And then we can always cut the strings. I like having a little bit of that top exposed. I don't know why. And then again, I'm going to come out a little bit further for this side, so then that way I can get those bends in the fabric to be where I want them to be. So let's be a little bit more generous with the gel medium. Lay it down. And then pinch and work those bends. See there? It's just going to appear as if this is actually a 3D skull. There. So far, so good. Then just take and twist this and place it where we want it. So I'm probably going to fast forward through this part as I tinker with, because really there's, you know, it's really just going to be about tinkering and fiddling, but I want you to see. Okay, so for his bandana accent piece, I've just got some of the boneyard bones, and I'm going to use some collage medium here, and then this the paper string by Tim Holtz, although I think it might be discontinued, but it's got a great texture in there. So I'm going to take that and just start wrapping it around, kind of playing with where the placement of the bones are. Not wanting them to be exact, that's just me. And then I'm just going to hold this in place for a second or two, just to let it set. Snip this so this bag isn't okay. And as far as like the accent pieces, you know, I have a great local dollar store, and I'm not a jewelry maker, but if something catches my eye and think, you know, I'll use some of the elements and components, I pick them up just, you know, to have them in stock. And so like something like this, I know, $1, can you believe it? Anyway, I know I would never, you know, link all these, or it's just not my style to wear. So, but you know, somebody's done all the work with, you know, for me with these chains. So, and I feel that, you know, the bandana and just watching Pirates of the Caribbean, you know, he's got a lot of different elements to that headgear that he wears. So I'll just use some of this. I like the gemstone that's on here. It's just a perfect little, you know, size and scale. I've got the Idea-Ology spider, some coins from a different project, my treasure box. But because most, you know, a lot of these are just different color metals, you know, you've got some, I don't know, that's like a coppery. You can take and use your alcohol mixatives and, you know, get them to be all the same color, if you like. I like it that way just because I think then it's easier on the eye. I may leave these gold pieces just gold, but you know, it's you know, that's just the process. So I'm gonna break these up and kind of get them going. This here, I've got a little Idea-Ology charm, and on the back side I want some numbers in here, so we're going to put some remnant rubs on here. So off screen I'm probably just going to break these all up, maybe jump on, show you how I alcohol ink them, but it's really pretty simple, and I'll be back shortly. Okay, I wanted to show, I've shortened these chains, and I want this to be covered, but, and you know, again, I'm not a jewelry maker. I'm sure they have little things that you can buy that would do this, but I'm just using what I have on hand, and I had some of these fluted fasteners by Holtz Idea-Ology, but I need it to be bent, so I just wanted to pop on to show you how easy this is to do. And I'm just using my needle nose because my nails are too long and getting in the way. But so I'm just kind of molding it or bending so it does what I want it to do, which is to cover up where these chains are connected. It doesn't have to be, you know, perfect, because, you know, this has gone through many, many years of pirate wearing. So just enough to kind of cover it up. There. I'm liking that. Okay, so now I'm going to get to some alcohol inking. Oop, there. It's doing what I want it to. Can you see it? Okay, so I've got my pieces inked with some gold, and now mushroom just antiques and just ages everything great. So I'm just adding a little bit here to the bones. And I don't mind just using my fingers and my hands. You can always use, you know, the applicator with the felt tips if you like. But I'm good with getting my fingers inky. And then here's the coin charm piece that I added the remnant rubs to. That gets a little bit, we'll just dip in. I like putting it in my packaging because then that way none's wasted. And then if I need to move it, you know, out of the way, it's contained. It's just my little thought process there with that one. And then we need some on the spider here. And we'll just give these a sec to dry. And I'll be back to assemble it all onto. Still got a little bit wet here, so wait till that's dry. Okay, so now my embellished piece that's going to go on the bandana is all done, and I saved you the agony because I'm all thumbs when it comes to working with stuff like this. It's just so small, but really it's not hard, it's just fumbly. So I just basically, you know, just connected them all with jump rings, and then just, you know, fed them through a spot that was still available, you know, with the string that's wrapped around there. And so that's going to go pretty much kind of like right here, like to appear as if it's holding his bandana or scarf, whatever you want to call it, together. So let's put that aside because we're going to start to work on fading out and adding in some shadows in here just to make it look a little bit more authentic. So I like having it kind of bunched up and kind of twisted, and a little bit of, you know, just folding and variety right here. So I'm now just going to use a hot glue gun just for a quick grab. Oh, it's been on a bit, so. Okay, there we go. And I'm also going to cut off these extra. Well, you know what? Maybe we'll just plan on tacking them. Yeah, let's tack them just over here. They kind of look good over there. Let's just add a dollop there. And there, that's going to work and look good. Okay, so using an old brush, because this is just 91% alcohol, rubbing alcohol, and I don't want to use a good brush because it's pretty harsh on the bristles. I'm just going to, in the parts that are raised, add some of this dab some of it away. Basically, I'm just kind of making it look like it's worn. It's going to take a little bit for it to appear, but. And then I've got some red pepper alcohol ink, and I'm going to use this to go into the shadows and make these creases stand out more by making them darker. And I'm just going to put this right on my mat. The silicone's up because you don't want to use the silicone piece with alcohol inks, it stains it. But I'm just adding it in here where some of these creases would go, or are. And just keep going until you see something that you like. Trying to remove some of the pinkness of this hat, because as it dried it of course went lighter because it was a, you know, it was white, so it's going to naturally just be lighter. And adding more in down here. And this obviously is going to be different for you depending on where your creases are. Give this a quick little dry, although probably pretty close to being dry. Okay, so this is dry now, and the rubbing alcohol didn't lighten that up as much as it did with the other material I used. So I'm just going to use some Distress, and this happens to be antique linen. I like the consistency of this, and I'm just going to wipe off some. I want basically just more of a dry brush on here. See how that's really, I want the texture to pull the paint and the acrylic. You see that? There's a lot of different things you could use with this. You could use a wax, or anything that is opaque enough. And can be, you know, on a porous surface. And down the side, can't forget the side. And of course it's going to be more worn out around the edge of his, you know, the skull. And while I have this antique linen out, I'm not liking this black so much right here. That happened when I stamped the image. So I'm just going to fix this right now, kind of make it not so visible. And as it soaks in, some of that Distress barn door might, you know, soak into the acrylic paint, but that's okay. Just put another layer on if you choose. Add some in here. There you have it. So we will take and glue this down. I like it right about, oh, like right there, covering up his eye a little bit. Just using hot glue. And there you go. Oop. Got some strings. Remember, you can always melt the hot glue strings with a quick blast of the heat gun. And there we go. Now I may end up using, you know, maybe a remnant rub spider, or if you had an itty bitty little spider, just to help, you know, as an indicator for the spider web inside there. So that's it for the skull. If you want to, you know, move on to other videos, be my guest, but I am going to complete this up by putting it onto what do we got? A mini frame panel. So I am going to be finishing this up. But if you were here really just to see how I did the pirate skull, I'm not going to be doing any much, you know, excuse me, I'm not going to be doing anything further to this other than maybe the remnant rub. So that's it. So I want my frame to be pretty dark and stand out against, I think I'm going to end up having this paper from the PaperStash as the background. So, but it's wood, so I really want all this grain to stand out. I don't want to lose that. So I'm going to actually use black soot spray stain, and I like to, if I'm going to be painting it on like this, I like to put it in the cap, just so then that way I've almost got like a, you know, little holder. And I'm going to start with the main flat portions of this and use the stain. So then that way it penetrates into that wood, and squirting occasionally and really kind of staying on these flat, bigger portions, because we are going to be using the black soot distress paint and adding that to these areas here, where it'll really get down into these grooves as a shadow, and then we'll lighten them up a little just to make them pop. Okay, there we go. So even though this paper can take a beating and is pretty heavy duty, I don't know how much wet medium I'm going to end up putting on here. So sometimes, like in this kit, in this instance, I want to seal and protect the print that's on this paper. So I love vintage distress collage medium. And I'm just adding a thin layer with my brush and just getting some, I like the brush marks in there, but then I'm also just helping along, making some more variances in the shade on the paper, going with my finger and just kind of pushing, because when that dries this is going to be a little bit darker there, and it just adds just, you know, a little bit more. So that looks pretty good to me, nice and vintagey. And then I'm also going to be doing, and now I keep my brush, I don't clean it. So because it's got vintage on there, I'll just wipe that off and then stick it in a bag that has a little wet baby wipe in there to keep it moist, and I don't clean my brush. I know it's probably not suggested, but I just don't have time for that. So I've got some crazing here. So I'm just going to put some on pretty thick in areas, knowing I'm kind of figured out my layout before, and I know my skull's going to be over kind of prominently in this corner. So I'm just going to add some in areas that I think it'll look cool. Because the crazing's a little different than the crackle medium. This just adds that, oh, how does Tim explain it? It was great. Yeah, it just adds that real slight crackling like you would find with, you know, pottery pieces. Or, okay, for instance, like this in my coffee cup. All those little natural little cracks that happen when you do pottery. So I want to add and have some of that on this piece. So, yep. See how it's kind of uneven and thicker, and the big trick with this stuff is you gotta let it air dry. I know, tough for me too, but I'm gonna set this aside and let it dry. Okay, so there's probably 100 different ways that you can distress this frame. This is only one of, like I said, many. But I'm going to be pulling in some of the brown from the background with frayed burlap and old paper. I don't need much because, again, we're just going to kind of distress and pull these little bumps out here, which I don't know exactly what those are called. I don't know what you would call those, but and what I'm going to use is, I've got one of Dina's media brushes, which I absolutely love these for dry brushing. It's got a real, see how, in case you don't have one, it's a real stiff brush, bristled brush. And what you want really is, I'm going to start with the frayed burlap first. Just tap a little on there, get very, very little. You really don't want much at all. See, barely. And then I'm going to tap it off on a dry paper towel, kitchen towel, and I'm just going to start brushing it on here randomly. Kind of going back and forth. Okay, so this background piece is done, and you can see, let me get close up into it, like right here, that crazing. It just is subtle enough. But now we're going to get that to pop out a little bit more. So I'm going to use distress crayons. And And I've got a couple different colors here depending on, you know, what I want. Walnut stain, hickory smoke, black soot, pumice stone, picket fence, and then some of the frayed burlap. And this is, the crayons are really soft and have a real nice opaque finish to it. So see how it just really you're pushing it in there. Just wonderful. And then if you feel like, you know, it's not, you want to lighten it up a little bit, you can always just add just a splash of water and move that around, and it'll give it a real nice effect. Okay, so after some tinkering off camera, I decided I needed to add some red, kind of so, you know, directs the eye. So I'm going to add some red behind here, I believe. And then I found just this fish netting. I don't know, my daughter had purchased it at Michael's for a project she did. And then here. But I'm also feeling that the frame needs a little something, and we need to pull some gold in here in another place other than just the accessories here. So I'm just going to take, I've got some of the alcohol ink gold mixative, and I'm just going to use my finger and just apply it kind of in just a few areas. Now if you had you know, if you've got paste or you've got any other gold, you know, Inca gold, or definitely could be used, but I'm just using the alcohol ink because this mixative is what I used with the embellishments. And it's just going to add, just kind of help pull it all together. So let's see how that's going to be. Yeah, see? Then I figured tie this around here for the red there. I don't know, I'm feeling, as much as I like that background, I feel like I need something else in here, but I'm really trying to keep it quite simple also. So let me do a little more tinkering off screen and we'll see where it takes us. Okay, so I have decided I'm going to add just a little bit of the clear embossing solution through the stencil and then use my gold. This is pretty bold, so I'm only going to go kind of more random, just implying the hint of some stencil work. I think this is going to add what I think is missing. And normally you don't have to use the whole stencil, but I kind of like just this line work. And as you can tell, you know, this is probably one of my favorite stencils. I love this scroll work, but I'm okay with not cleaning my stencils if it's acrylic. I mean, I wipe them down if, you know, I'm using water-soluble ink of any kind, but when I use acrylic, you know, I'm not real good about cleaning them, obviously. But I'm okay with that. So yeah, this is just giving me some hints. I'm not looking for the image to actually be completely, you know, I'm not looking for it to be a solid stencil work. Okay, so as you can see, I'm so I've tinkered around enough. I've glued everything down. And now my last step is just to add my skull. It's going to go about here. So I've just added some foam, the scrap pieces, and then I'm just going to add a little dollop of hot glue here, and then I know down here. And that should be plenty to keep it in place. And there you go. Thank you for joining me. Some close-ups are coming. And I hope you continue watching the 13 projects of Halloween.